Making sense, analysis, and reflexivity. I feel the nature of this conversation is situated right at the edge of a post-Cartesian universe. That the work we are embarking on as arts-based therapists and arts-based researchers continues to add to this building orchestra resounding a return to our bodies, each other, our communities, and the world. Not only does this sound, I guess, potentially good for well-being, what to speak of the survival of our species and other life and the planet, but it also opens a new era of knowing, attention, and questions, and it begins to offer the well overdue return of recognition to indigenous systems of knowledge, which have been beyond undermined, and which have lived and understood these perspectives for far longer than our Western calendar can even recognize. We are standing as the living data of this emerging shift, and I feel this comes precisely alive in the topic of analysis, reflexivity, and rigor. I experienced this in my dissertation. The data making, creating, and playing was wild, but when it came time for making sense, for analysis and reflexivity, all my arty tentacles just dried up and dropped off. Deborah was asking, like, whoa, what happened to the art? Go back to the art. I couldn't find where making sense, analysis, and reflexivity lived with the art. All these words themselves were overpowered with a cloak of expectations and assumptions that I thought research, science, and knowledge meant. I thought that to analyze would mean I needed to reduce what was expanding and billowing out into reduced, concrete, causal parts. I thought that reflexivity would mean that I needed to keep digging away at myself until I came to some kind of core that would reflect a more truer reality and understanding than my lived subjectivity. I thought that to make sense of my data would mean that I needed to head first into some kind of analytical system of cognitive reasoning to find the truth and the essence and the core of what occurred. I felt I needed to find what was the thing beneath all my stuff, the answer, the truth of my inquiry. I held faith in a truth somewhere out there beneath my messy views, and if I was just vigorous enough, if I was reflexive enough and analytical enough, that I would surely find it. Or if I was more attuned and awakened enough, then it would dawn on me, the answer to all things, the truth. I really felt that as soon as the data making time was over and the getting your mess together into a Word document to submit was expected, I just grabbed for the cognitive, reductive, atomic, disengaged individual self-positioning, and the art and my body and my resonances were the first to go. So my ongoing curiosity and an open question is, how do we do arts-based analysis and arts-based reflexivity? What does that look like when we stand in ourselves as embodied, embedded, and enworlded beings? What does that look like when we recognize phenomenologically that meaning and sense are non-separate from our senses and our bodily resonances and emotions? What does that look like when we have the arts at the heart, not only to touch and inspire and express, but also as something that has its own agency, and it goes places and does things that we never anticipated in our research proposals? I don't have answers to these, I just have more and more questions. What does it take to stand at the edge with the arts in the conversation of knowing? I don't know. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's a good sign, because this work is at the edge. We are the living inquiry data of this convergence between worlds. We're holding in one arm a history and still prevalent belief system in foundationalism that knowledge can be known through our vigorous, disengaged digging, and in the other, a return to embodied, embedded, enworlded life. And maybe this is just my experience. I mean, what I encountered in my dissertation was that despite my intentions and philosophizing of embodiment, intersubjectivity, relationality, the reality was that I'm far more individualist, Cartesian, and reductive than I'd like to think that I am. And that it was this that I encountered in my work. It wasn't so much about what meaning or sense that I could muster out of my cluster of data, but more so an interaction and an encounter with how I make sense and make meaning of my world. And this, at the convergence of arts-based knowing, is so exciting because here we are again, standing at the edge between worlds as a confluence of so many layers and histories and contradictions, and the reality of our never fully articulatableness as humans, and our never fully knowableness of life. And it's here that our arts therapy methodologies enable attention and curiosity.